not many people actually know this, but I was a day away from signing a contract with the Brazilian rugby union to go and lead their, be the assistant coach and lead their program into the Olympics, obviously in Rio, within the Argentinian at the time, and but they put it off for quite about 2.5, 3 months. It took to actually get the final paperwork. The day before we got the paperwork, Nigel Melville actually rang me, and 6 weeks later we were in the States. So I'm Chris Brown, and welcome to the Rugby Hive.
Today's guest is Chris Brown, winner of the Capgemini Coach of the Series award in 2019 for his role with the USA Women's Eagles, taking them to a silver medal finish, their best ever result in history. Brown started on the Sevens Series years back with Mike Friday, taking charge of Kenya, elevating the Africans to their best ever finish on the series in 2009, placing number 6 on the planet. Brown then moved to America with Friday, spending 4 years with the USA men's program, turning them around in dramatic fashion from 13th in the world to 6th in 2018. It was fitting that Mike Friday stood alongside Chris Brown, accepting the Coach of the Series award in 2019, with the men's USA Eagles placing 2nd on the series, playing in all 10 semi-finals that season. In this episode, we look back at Brown's upbringing that saw him drop out of high school to play for the All Blacks. We track his amazing journey to South Africa, Kenya, and eventually the US of A. We talk about the coaching insights in developing world-class programs, how Friday and him took the USA men to their first ever tournament win in the series, and how USA women finished on the podium. With an extra year ahead of the Olympic Games, what can they do in Japan? Here is episode 12 with legend Chris Brown.
He's so dangerous! Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him!
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen, Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen and the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Oh, he's more dangerous than climate change!
Hello and welcome to episode 12. This time we return to North America and we chat with the USA Women's Sevens head coach Chris Brown. He was selected as the Capgemini Sevens Coach of the Series in 2019. His USA side, the Eagles, finished 6th in 2016 and 2017. They took 5th in 2018. But the dedication, the commitment, the chemistry, the flair, it all paid off in 2019. Second place finish on the series, just behind New Zealand on the podium. 10 points of difference, and that was absolutely remarkable what Brownie's done for the program. He's also worked with the men's side with Mike Friday a few years back. A very humble human, kind, caring, always looking to get the best out of his squad. One of the coaches you kind of want to play for, eh, Robin?
Yeah, I enjoyed gaining his insights, and he talks about his successes both with the USA men when he was working with Friday, and he had a lot of success coming off the back of Richie Walker's run with the 2018 World Cup. Obviously, they had a big year, and they finished 2nd. I think they finished 5th this last year, and he's still building. He's just in his first year or two already. So he was just very humble about, the highs and the lows, which we all experience in international sport or even local sport. What I really, really enjoyed though was his growth mindset for himself and for his program, and things that really aligned with me is just simplicity and clarity. He wants his athletes to know that he's behind them, and they have a simple plan, and we're going to play to our strengths and stick to it. So, and then he's got mentors around the world as well. So he talks about just connecting with some of the Super Rugby colleagues of his back in New Zealand, where he's from, and just saying that, you have highs, you have lows, but it's those lows that make you stronger. So he's got a longer term picture for that program. The athletes that are pouring into that USA Eagles women's side is just frightening. So looking forward to watching them develop when the world gets rolling.
Can't wait for Olympics 2021. And then Robin, you didn't come here for a haircut, my friend. So much rugby happening north of the border with you.
Yeah, it's been really great helping out locally, just building programs. And I've got some exciting announcements in the next few months, but excited to get back on the field with the national women's side today. And it's been since March since I've been down at the National Training Center. So looking forward to seeing all those smiley faces. How about on your side?
It's wonderful to hear. Can't wait to see it return properly. Yeah, my side, we took a weekend away, Verity and I. We went to New Hampshire, spent a few days there in the woods, the beautiful lake house. It's such a stunning part of the world. The leaves starting to change colors. Magnificent sight. New Hampshire, though, the motto, live free or die. So probably one of the more famous ones as you see they don't mess around on that side. Rugby-wise, it's been a busy couple of weeks, I'd say. HSBC World Rugby Sevens Series Awards this week for 2020. I was fortunate enough to be on the selection panel with the commentators, legends that we've interviewed for this podcast like Carl Tanana and the rest of the gang, and a handful of former players. So congrats to firstly the men's side. There's Scott Curry, Tavita Verandamu, JC Pretorius, Selvin Davids, Napolini Balatha, Amanasi Tuamamba, and Jordan Conroy. And then on the women's side, we had 3 players represented here from North America. We had Ghislaine Landry, Brittany Ben, and Christy Kershey. And then from Australia, Shani Williams, and New Zealand carved it up with Tyler Nathan Wong, Ruby Tui, and Stacey Flula. And so congratulations to all those players.
Yeah, it's just good to see both Canada and USA represented, and it's just showing, that we're in that top few nations in World Sevens. And so for young Canadian girls out there and young American girls across the country, sky's the limit. And I also heard that you've been voted by the fans as the best commentator in the world. So congratulations, or by me and your mom. I don't know.
Thank you very much. I'll take those 2 votes to the bank, my friend. Let's see. Other rugby news. We had the British Lions. Their rugby tickets via the ballot have closed this past week. I know a lot of folks are talking about going to Africa in 2021 in July to watch that famous gathering against the Springboks, the current world champions who haven't had played much rugby recently. And then close to home here in the US, Rugby Town USA, news out of them, the former Colorado Raptors side in Major League Rugby. They're now a high-performance training center for women's and men's USA Eagles. They announced also a very interesting program they're going to be taking part called the Crossover Academy, taking in sporting sensations from other codes. This will be very interesting because everybody knows the talent, the level of athlete here in America, and a lot of folks, don't stay with their preferred sport due to not be able to land professional contracts. So it'll be interesting. Think about Colin Isles, think about players like that transferred from another sport to rugby and how good they were, particularly in sevens. So you better watch out that side, my friend. It's all happening here.
Let's shine the spotlight on North American coaches. So I've got 4 coaches I want to highlight here today from 4 different regions of Canada. I'll be doing a few more after that as well. But first up, Sarah Shaw from Ontario, recent grad from Brock University, and is already transitioning into being a successful coach. The girls during COVID, she's just doing as much research, watching game film, and picking as many people's brains as possible. So she's one to look out for. The infamous Brett Canterberg from Lumsden, Saskatchewan, who's the head coach and program manager of MacDowell Rugby. That guy's a school teacher there and he just grinds every day too. So he's running a tighter ship than me, Dal. On Vancouver Island here in British Columbia, we have Sherry Spence. She wears every single hat in the Cowichan Valley, and there's close to 300 kids, and about 150 of them are young girls, and Sherry's to credit for a lot of that. And then going back to Ontario is Kevin Verkis, coached him with some Junior Canada, and unfortunately he suffered a bad knee injury a couple years ago, and he's been working with Tyler Leggett with Upright Rugby, traveling around to different tournaments, and he'll probably be at Rugby Town Sevens 2021 coach. And so he's a guy to look out for too. So to all those coaches out there across Canada and the US, just want to say thank you because sports across both countries at the youth level and developing level is selfless, and it's a volunteer job. So thank you again.
A couple thank yous on this side as well, Robin. My good friend Jeremy Castro, I've told you about from the Oxy Old Boys rugby playing days in California. This past weekend, he was involved in another wonderful cause through his company, Brand Marinated. They donated 900 boxes of fresh produce and food to folks in need in his area. And that's just wonderful to see, the rugby community coming together. Personally, I got a chance to actually go to my first training session during COVID, the Mystic Rugby Club in Boston. I got to see the training. I didn't actually attend the training session, but I was there watching with a good friend of mine, Bazi Rosinski, Maccabee, a rugby legend. His son, Rudy, and I played together in Israel in 2013. He was out there stepping a few parked cars and showing them how it's done. I was definitely itching to get the boots on, but obviously I need to find them first.
So word on the street is we finally have some exciting news in regards to the MLR in 2021.
Yeah, Robin, huge news. In fact, was kind of curious on social media. They released something big news tomorrow with the eyes pointing out, and you're like, okay, what is happening? So they finally released. They're going to be kicking off in 2021 in March. I thought that they might push it back to April. That was the talk initially, but they're going for March, which is phenomenal. 18 weeks of regular season matches. There's an East Coast conference and a West Coast conference, and then they'll be playing various playoffs to see your number one East Coast seed. Your Eastern champion, if you will play your Western champion on August 1st. So that is huge news. And, there's been a real growth in the game. Of course, there are 13 teams playing right now, and they're going to be matches televised on CBS Sports Network and Fox Sports 2. And so it's going to be a busy season traveling around. And logistically, obviously, we hope they got everything in place, which we know due to COVID. It's going to be fantastic, though, for the fans. They haven't got to see rugby for a long time. And, of course, the league ended after a few weeks in this year in 2020. So this is going to be an absolute humdinger, my friend.
Yeah, it's exciting for the league. I'll say that because, for all those great investors and everybody that's put in the infrastructure and sponsors and supports, we need to get it to go live so it can thrive. But also to all those new recruits, either the big names or some of these draft picks from the draft a few months ago, nothing more exciting than getting your first pro contract and then not getting to play. So at least they got something to look forward to and a little motivation to put in the work in the next 4 or 5 months.
Exactly. And I'll quickly run through the teams for those interested. The East Coast, you got Rugby ATL. That's in Atlanta, Georgia. In Boston, you have the New England Free Jacks. New Orleans, you got NOLA Gold. Washington, D.C., you got Old Glory. You got Rooney in New York. Rugby United New York, and then the Toronto Arrows, of course, the one Canadian side. They make up the 6 teams on the East Coast. The West Coast has 7 teams. We have in Texas 3 sides, actually. The Houston SaberCats, the new team, the Dallas Jackals, the Austin Guiltinis are there. And then in Los Angeles, the LA Guiltinis. In fact, the Gilgronis were the team in Austin. Sorry, I get my drinks mixed up. Very confusing, the Australian owners on that side. And then, of course, the champion Seattle Seawolves are one of the top sides in that league, as well as the San Diego Legion, unbeaten in 2020 with huge names signed to their side. The Utah Warriors are the 7th team that make that up. So East Coast versus West Coast. Put you on the spot here, Robin. 2021, what are you thinking?
I'm going to have to go with whatever Verity says because, and I believe it'll probably be something ending in teenies. So outside of the Toronto Arrows, I was a big Seawolves fan, but Philly Mac's no longer there. But yeah, I'm going to support all the teams at this point. But Bill Webb out in Toronto will probably have my hide if I won't wave the flag up north. So we're waiting for a West Coast MLR team, and hopefully that's on the horizon in the next few years so we can get behind here on the coast. Well, over here, it's National Coaches Week across Canada, and I typically highlight a lot of my coaches and a lot of the more known coaches across the country. And I've captured most of them over the last 2 years, and I have a real focus on developing coaches and setting them up for success and using my resources to give them the tools to develop.
You'll hear it first on Verity Explains. Shut the gates, keep the change, try time.
No talk about rugby, just drinks.
Exactly. And then Hive-related news, we're on Amazon Music, which is absolutely huge, whatever that means. We've been accepted into the beta testing, and so the Rugby Hive podcast is on there, plus, of course, a million other platforms where you get your pods. Make sure to catch us on all the socials. We're, of course, very active there at Rugby Hive on Twitter and Facebook, at My Rugby Hive on Insta. Another sensational episode awaits. Time now for episode number 12. Very special guest today. Joining us is Brownie. Such a delight to have you on with us, my friend.
Cheers, mate.
Tell us, man, how are you and your family managing during this time?
Yeah, we're pretty good. It's we've got a 4-bedroom house in San Diego. It doesn't have a backyard. It's big enough that we've been able to mess the whole thing up, and but at least it's a bit of a playground for the kids. And we're in San Diego, so 75 degrees ain't bad most of the time, so we can get out and about a little bit.
I was going to say you're definitely on the right coast for weather-wise. You're in a better situation than Alev Calter. We had her on here recently, and she said she was living with her sister and 14 chickens and a few other animals, so it was a bit cramped there.
I guess it comes down to the choices you make, yeah?
Exactly. Brownie, listen, as we do with all our other legends on here, let's delve a bit into your background. Tell us where you grew up and a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, cool, mate. Look, born and bred in Taranaki in New Zealand. So, yeah, Kiwi through and through. Getting close to actually meeting the halfway point. Well, actually, I've still got about 6 or 7 years to go. But, yeah, born and bred in Taranaki, and ended up travelling over to South Africa and working there for 4 years and then a couple of years up north in Africa and Namibia and Kenya. And so that was straight out of school, etc. And my wife's African, so I better throw that out there. And After spending some time in South Africa, I said that I was definitely going to be marrying an Afrikaans girl.
How is your Afrikaans?
Ek is baie fluent in Afrikaans, you know. So, I was much better when I was living in Namibia. That was my third year over there, and I was actually translating for the two English consultancy coaches that we had at the time. Unfortunately, a lot of the Afrikaans does have a few English words, especially when you're in the rugby circuit.
Brilliant.
Spent a bit of time in the UK playing back in the day, but I was pretty young, finishing up playing at 22, and then got the opportunities through South Africa, which is why I'm so fond of that country as a whole.
And what were some of your sports growing up that you loved, other than rugby?
Well, I was watching The Last Dance last night, brought me back to my heyday at high school, and I was the first 5 captain. We had 10 teams in the conference, and we were last, but I was still the captain, and I was a point guard, and we actually did beat the number 1 team in the conference, though, because they had an illegal player. So they got disqualified, and we managed to get that first victory of the season, which was great. And then my background, I played state tennis. Tennis was probably I love rugby. My dad was passionate about rugby, but tennis was probably the one thing where I'm like, should I have continued on in that? And being 5'7" and not the biggest, but I was pretty quick around the court and did relatively well at state level. And but I recognised very early on that in New Zealand, it's very rare that a tennis player comes out and goes very far, and it's very isolated compared to having a team to work with. So, but tennis and a bit of basketball through high school were my other sports. And
did you pursue playing rugby at a higher level once you graduated from high school?
I started playing Premier Club Rugby in New Zealand. So how it works is, straight out of high school, you go into, say, the club rugby setting, and then there's the academy set up, and then it's a stepping stone to ITM Cup, then Super Rugby, then the All Blacks. And so I was still at high school playing in the Premier Club competition, and things were going pretty well. And then I had a few niggly injuries over the next 3 years, which ultimately just got me a little bit fearful towards the contact point. And I was in the Hurricane Schools Academy and played in the the provincial ITM Cup age group teams. But realistically, once you fall out of love with contact, you kind of start to look for alternative options. And so it kind of meant that, all right, well, I got an opportunity to go coach in South Africa. I thought that would be good for my mind and to be able to kind of refresh and fall in love with it again. And I never really returned to it. You always back yourself. You think, oh, what if? But realistically, I didn't have access to the old mental skills coaches that we have now. And that was a big hiccup for me, was the fear of failure. And also, and that led into that mindset towards contact in the end when I was still playing. So.
And Brownie, you mentioned, did you finish high school, or did you goose step out of there?
Oh mate, I goose stepped out of there. So no, I actually left high school. I don't know what it's in America, but in New Zealand, it's we talk about 7th form or year 13. So I actually left high school in the middle of year 12. We at the end of year 11, so I was only 15. I was like, I've had enough of this. I wasn't doing so well, and I'm going to go start an apprenticeship. I'm going to play for the All Blacks, and I'm going to start the process. 2 months into apprenticeship over the summer, when school's off, I very quickly realised that I didn't want to work as hard as what the builders and the tradesmen did. So I didn't leave school officially, and I signed back up, and I worked really hard for about 2 months. And then the provincial tennis or rugby season, and then the tennis season after that took over. And put it this way, I wasn't doing so well, and there was a Spanish exchange student actually who made me stick around for an extra couple of months. Well, not made me, but I chose to. As soon as she left school, then it was time for me to move on, So, but I ended up doing a community college diploma for 2 years, which got me a university entrance, and then I went off to university after that. So did a little bit differently than the old conventional route.
Yes, exactly. Now, tell us, what age did you go to South Africa? You mentioned your coaching, so I want to get into how you switched over from your interest into coaching, and then how did you end up in the US with Mike Friday?
So the community college that I went to, they had a South African guy that set up the program. It was a sports development program, and he went back to South Africa to the head of conditioning or physical performance at one of the top academies in South Africa called the Puka Rugby Institute. Now, once I'd finished there and gone off on to university and finished my degree, he had actually moved on to the Cheetahs, but they wanted somebody that they just built this program at the Puka Rugby Institute, and they didn't want experienced person coming in and trying to change it with all their ideas and everything. So out of the blue, I got given an opportunity to go over and run this program and really just implement something that had already been built. And but that was a starting point of transferring over to coaching, and it was purely conditioning with a little bit of catch, pass and kicking coaching on the side. But that was my starting point, mate. I finished in South Africa, went to Namibia for the 15s team. Then I went to Kenya with Mike Friday, brought me in. We didn't know each other. It was just he was looking for somebody that knew Africa or had some experience working with the diversity there and was willing to be located there. And so that happened. And then 2 years later, Mike got approached by USA Rugby and he asked me if I was willing to come along with him to try and do something similar to what we'd done with the Kenyan side. And so that we jumped at it. Not many people actually know this, but I was a day away from signing a contract with the Brazilian Rugby Union to go and lead their, be the assistant coach and lead their program in to the Olympics, obviously in Rio, within the Argentinian at the time, and but they put it off like by about 2.5-3 months it took to actually get the final paperwork. And the day before we got the paperwork, Nigel Melville actually rang me. And 6 weeks later, we were in the States. So that led to that. And then, obviously, regarding how we...
And can you describe how your coaching group was able to take the U.S. men's program from 13 to 6 in such a short amount of time?
We ultimately just had to, and Mike will say this, ultimately it was his program. He was the brains behind it all. And my job was to be on the ground and just manage it when he wasn't in country, because ultimately all the rugby strategy stuff was all his, with regards to the physical performance, which was a big part of my background. It was my responsibility and aligning that to how he wanted to play. And then, making sure that we empowered and developed the players within a set of boundaries and I guess for them to grow as rugby players and as young men, and having some direction initially, core values and some, again, as I say, and Mike always refers to the so-called boundaries to allow the boys to flourish and to maximise how they progress and develop was the first thing that we did. And I remember one of the things we came into over the first couple of months and recognised how disjointed the team was and how there was heaps of little silos and very little conversations, a lot of phone time, even back then, mate, 6-7 years ago. But as we started to really implement kind of a hard work mentality and we started to see the fight for each other start to develop, and that was only going to develop once the conversation started and the empathy towards each other started, and a lot of that was done through what Mike would say was the yakka yards, and then confidence coming out of the unity we started to see on the pitch with us all being on the same page with the frameworks and the systems that we employed.
How did you guys overcome the hurdle? Because I know, being a Canadian playing for Canada and obviously following Canada and US my whole life, building that winning culture, because the US is the ingredients for a while. I think you guys have done an even greater job, obviously, since Mike's taken over of finding those diamonds in the rough, and obviously a lot of systems. But it's that building that belief that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. When did they figure out that we can compete with the best?
I'm going to refer to Kenya and the US here, because what was very apparent in the Kenyan setup, there was such a desire to learn and grow and develop, and we had so many challenges off pitch outside of the players group. In America, what was promised to us initially was agreed upon. It was much easier to work and understand this is what we've got to work with. And, obviously I don't have as much knowledge or detail because I wasn't the head of the program. Mike was there, but with regard, it was pretty, especially with Mags or Alex Magleby having a real positive effect on the direction of the programs and the support there was the Golden Eagles but also just the structures, etc. And we had a bit of a real heart-to-heart post Dubai and Port Elizabeth at the time, where there was a little bit more rebellious nature in this group, and only because we were asking a lot of old players to change, players that had been through 2 or 3 coaches that were in their late 20s, etc., to change when they'd already been asked to change on multiple occasions. But you can look at like Danny Barrett, you look how far he's come and how influential he's been over the last 6 years. He was one of the ones that we had a lot of push and shove and give and take, not literally, but in the sense of moulding the program and moulding him and us adapting as well. And I know that him and Mike have a very, very close relationship. But again, we had to go through those growing pains. And the same with Falau. And I guess Madison Hughes had a huge effect to play on it, because as the youngest in the squad at the time, he was very much a mediator that connected all the pieces to the puzzle, and even at 23 years old. And we started to see some momentum building as we built into that London tournament at the end, which we took away. We just started to see some milestones achieved and started to get a victory over England, push the Kiwis right to the very end. You know, the Fijians played them 3 or 4 times in a row, and we were only just missing the mark, etc. So, but then when we got that, we saw more and more, the more we played together and really stuck to the frameworks or the systems of the approach that Mike had, and we saw our core skills going through the roof, and that we were physically able to go to dark places and function there. It took us about 9 months to even be set up to be successful, and 9 months or a season's not a long time, but I think we were very, very fortunate to be able to experience that, and that was in the Olympic qualification year,
Yeah, it certainly was so impressive to watch, and as a new American, if you will, fantastic to see. In our era, we only got to the semi-finals. That was the furthest we progressed, but that was 2009, But again, we did step Robin and get past him, so that was nice at least. Tell us about that first series title ever, the one you mentioned in London in 2015. Can you describe that weekend to us?
Yeah. I guess the unreal part of it was, as it finished up, was we had the Aussies, and we played the English obviously there as well, but in the sense of they had the Aussies in the final, and just it was almost like the group just went to another level. We'd seen all these frameworks the framework that we were working on in attack and our defensive systems. We'd seen glimpses and moments of consistency in training, but not to the level that we experienced over that final day in London. And then to see almost like the ruthlessness that we put the Aussies to the sword. And you've got 105 kilogram Danny Barrett, or 230 pound Danny Barrett, stepping in line, breaking at 60 metres out and running 60 to score while he put somebody into a coffin on the way down, and so I think it was, again, we unfortunately didn't have this experience with the Kenyans. We missed that first opportunity to win a tournament with them, but we definitely did with the men, and obviously Mike's had a lot more success in recent years, and us with the women of late, getting that first victory. And then it's a kind of a real, it's such an emotional roller coaster being on the series, as both of you guys know, and it's like, it's just little things that are missing that stop you from transferring through the next step, and you blooming could have four brilliant games, and then one where you're just slightly off, or et cetera through a tournament, or you could have 3 poor games out of 6, but you still get to the quarterfinals and you manage to scrape through. And I think the big thing for us in London was that it was a tournament where we just built, and it was the same as when we won the first Las Vegas one. It was a progressive step up every tournament. It wasn't kind of like, oh, we're lucky to get through there, etc., and then hit or miss. That's what you want as a coach, don't you? It's from minute one, you just want to refine and get better and better and better as the tournament goes on, and all going well, that you're starting at a level from game one that doesn't leave you going, man, crap, we've lost that one, etc. We're already at a standard that we can build off and propel ourselves forward.
And then, Brownie, your journey, you then move across to the women's side of it, the fall of 2018. Tell us about that transition.
Pretty special in many ways. Look, I mean, I was really privileged to work under a few different coaches. Matt Pralford, who's now the forward coach for the English, was with the Springboks when they won the World Cup last year. He was the head coach at the Rugby Institute, and his eye for detail and the level of detail that he'd go into and how he'd unify the group was so player focused, was pretty special to be a part of and to see in the sense of my first coaching opportunity. And then obviously Mike Friday is renowned and was renowned back then in the sense of being able to transform teams and being somebody that would fight for every inch for his players and being very, very loyal to his people that he works with, and seeing a lot of the attributes that ultimately lead to how I coach today was a real privilege. And when I got to come across to the women's side and I guess implement some of the things and learn some of the aspects of what comes with a lead role. And I think I was really fortunate that Mike delegated a lot to me. And what I mean by that, gave me the opportunity with the resident program when he wasn't permanently on the ground to learn some of the day-to-day management players, and without having to make any serious decisions, because ultimately that was his job and the head coach's job. And stepping over to the women's, that's where I had to really step up, ultimately take responsibility for the whole program. And what was really special was, again, like with the Kenyans, they were so hungry to learn and to progress and to grow. And they were at a point, the Kenyan team, they had 7 or 8 guys that had been there for 4 or 5 years. Same with the US women's team. They'd had enough of where they were and had been, and it was, they wanted change, and they wanted, and what I mean by that, in many ways, what they want to change in was, yes, they wanted clear direction, but they also wanted a place where they enjoyed coming to work. Emily Bidewell was absolutely brilliant, helping foster and develop culture that the guilds ultimately said what they wanted to represent, and we helped to guide it and refine it. And then that was a pretty special process to go through, and it's probably been the most rewarding. As we know, the majority of the time these athletes love coming to work now, no matter how hard it can be to function daily in a high-performance environment.
Well, the program from the outside looks very, very positive. Obviously, the results have spoke for themselves the last few years, but they just seem to be smiling a whole heck of a lot. And I know seeing them perform at the Sevens World Cup right before you took over, you could see building. There's a difference between tense and intense, and they seemed tense before, and now it's definitely intense when they're playing. So well done to you and your staff. And just transitioning to more of the couple specific areas that you wanted to work on when you took over, both skill, execution, and situational awareness. How did you implement that into your program?
Yeah, great point, mate. It's I inherited a group of athletes that even from through Richie Walker and Jules McCoy and Rick Suggett. If anyone's met Rick, unfortunately he's passed on now, but definitely big personality, big character, and a lot of these girls have fond memories of their experiences from back in 2014, 2013 with him. And so I inherited a group of athletes that they were a group of athletes, and we recognised that their core skills had developed, but and they knew what they wanted to try and do based off of the strategies that previous coaches had tried to implement. And but I think that the biggest thing was, as I said, about the cultural side of things, to a point where they would die trying for each other, and they would die or they would sacrifice a lot to spend the time needed to hone the skills and do the purposeful conditioning that they needed to do to be able to play their role within the system and the team. So we spent a lot of time around the contact point and around the catch pass, distribute, and understanding how to hesitate defences and keep spaces open when we see the best space to play to, but it's 2-3 seconds before it even gets there. How do we keep that space if we want it, or how do we adapt and adjust when, so picture reading, decision making, all the cliche things that people say, but just repetition, where it's not the same picture the whole time. At times it was the same picture that would just repeat, and then it's showing 4 or 5 different pictures that they would see, and then seeing how quickly they could recognise and play their role with whatever their role was right then within our framework or our attacking framework. So I mean, that was a huge emphasis from minute one, but it's obviously the first team that I've taken over. But you'll see, and you've all heard about how defences wins championships, and the first thing was like, well, no matter how powerful or how athletic or the individual skill sets that we have to be able to exploit and score, we want to make sure that we're in control as much as possible, and we need to be consistent in an element to really take confidence in. And they already had a relatively good restart aerial team with the left counters and Nicole Heveland's restarts and a lot of the jumpers, Abby Gustitis and Jordan Gray and Cheta Umba. We didn't have was a group of individuals defending together. So we just prioritised that for the first 3-4 months and really drove that into the ground in many ways. We didn't really see the rewards. We saw our defensive the amount of points scored against us just drop through all 6 events over that first season, and in the last 2 events we saw those the stretch KPIs that we had, to the point where we were the number 1 defensive team on the series through the last 3 events, which was pretty special to achieve, considering that's still going to be the thing that gives us the best chance of winning gold next year.
Yeah, your first season as head coach, most successful in the history of Eagles Sevens, placing second in 2019. We talked a bit about it, but what would you summarise overall your pillars of success for that season?
We talk about our culture, we talk about our physical preparation. Matt Long, Nicole Titmus, and a number of interns that have come through the program. You have 25 athletes with 1 physio and 1 conditioning coach. In a full-time environment, that there's a lot of work that goes into that. They're the people that spend the most time on the pitch because they have to be there and they have to prime and make sure that we're doing what we need to do from a match intensity and a game strategy priority standpoint. But then, you've got all the individual and a lot of the power and speed production work that they have to do outside of that. And so I'm very fortunate that I've got 2 people that are top quality in their fields, and more importantly that they're very much givers, and they go far, they go beyond, and nothing's ever an issue. So that's one of our pillars as the physical preparation. That's gone through the roof in the last 2 years. Then we look at our rugby side of things, which you've just heard, the core skills and the defensive structure, how we talk through our defence in the sense of our actions, show how unified and what our desire and our I guess how tight we are as a group. And then 3, it's the culture. It's creating that standard of execution with an environment which players feel safe and to express themselves and be vulnerable and be willing to get it wrong and to keep growing forward. And so, I mean, those have been the 3 biggest things that we've emphasised. And but alongside that, I guess the underlying thing is the trust that the players gave me. The players gave me day one to come in with, and Nicole came. She'd been there previously for a number of years, and she came back on board. I asked her, Emily Bidwell asked her if she would come back on board, and I was very grateful that she was willing to. And Matt had just started recently building into that World Cup with them, and so the trust that they've shown towards the three of us, as well as the additional staff, and buy-in what was absolutely huge. And going back to what I said about the American players being asked to change, the men's being asked to change multiple times through multiple coaches, these girls were willing to, and they've been through 1, 2, 3, 4 coaches in the space of 3 seasons, so they were being asked to do a lot, and it says a lot about the character of individual that I work with currently.
Well, smart coaches surround themselves by a better team or an excellent staff, and it's all about working smart. And it's great to get the athletes to buy in, but definitely using the resources that you already had in place is gold. And I know Nicole and the rest of your staff are world class. That's special to hear.
Yeah, cheers, man. They definitely are, and I'm glad that we've obviously got a few things to still sort out the union at the moment, but we're finding a way forward, and I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get at least our core staff back together to strive forward and see what we can achieve in this year ahead.
Let's rewind it back, though, to that World Rugby event, honouring yourself as Coach of the Year for the Women's Series. Mike Friday on the podium as well, Coach the Men's Series. What was it like for you two to be up there to receive that award? No one American had ever even been nominated.
Well, the unfortunate thing in the sense of how played had to shift the women's tournament about 2 months before it happened. They shifted us 2 weeks later to the south of France, or the southwest of France, and it was beautiful down there. But obviously 2 weeks earlier, Mike won that award, and a number of players were honoured. Steve Thomason, Ben Pinkerman, Danny Barrett. Previously Perry Baker's obviously been honoured, and even Carlin Isles winning a couple of the most points scored at trophies. No, it was pretty special. I mean, I didn't even realise that they had one of those awards until I saw Mike, receive it. And that's credit where credit's due. Is he's gone through a lot, really sacrificed a lot to be able to help that group of men achieve what they've achieved. And for me to be able to, I suppose, a pretty special year, be topped off with some acknowledgement from World Rugby or from the World Series, etc., was pretty special. And I think what really summed it up was that if we look back through the stats of that year one and recognising, more importantly, rather than just myself, how the squad played such a role, not just individual characters. We didn't have one player in the top 5 of any statistics in that year one with regards to involvements, tackles, tries scored, points scored. Not one. That shows how much of a team effort it was, that us progressing to number 2 in the world. Ultimately, in the last 3 events, we had the best success rate defensively and also when it came to outcomes. But the Kiwis obviously just smashed us a little bit too hard earlier on in the season. But I just love how that summed up the power and unity and what you can achieve, even if you don't have the so-called, and we've got a number of quality rugby players, but in the sense of in that season, the stats showed that it was a unified performance, which was pretty special.
As a World Rugby commentator, I get a chance to vote on the different categories. It's very easy voting for you as coach for the year because of what you've done with the side. So I know you're a humble bloke, but I just want to say it was an honour voting for you. I'm glad you won.
Cheers, mate. I got the trophy down in the fountain. My wife's already stuck it in the blooming cupboard.
Yeah, they get sick of those after a while. That's your problem for being successful. Now, that's a huge accomplishment, especially after your first year. As far as setting yourself up for success, what would have been an Olympic build-up, how does that look with another year of preparation going into 2021? And what's your team's view on that? Are you using it as an opportunity, or does it set you back with your team's peaking?
No, we've got a young side. We've got a pretty young side. If you look at, for us to range between 29 and 18, if this was 2024 and they pushed off a year, then it probably would have been like, oh, here we go. Just because of, age in general and what you've been going through and building up to and a lot of your planning. But for us to get an extra year, I'm really excited. It was pretty guttering to start off with, and I know a number of the girls, it really hurt them. But then, of course, there's the ones that feel now that they have a little bit more time to challenge and compete, and that's only good for bringing internal competition. And then there's the ones that also, in the sense of, from what I'm hearing from the group and our discussions that we've had, is they're seeing the positives. They're optimistic in the sense of, look, ultimately, we all get to choose how we see things. And you can choose to get caught up and focus on the negatives. And one of the big themes that we've been the whole time through is control what we can control. There's no complaining in the sense of, if you've got an issue, have you got a solution? If you've got a solution, go to the people that can solve it. That's a big part of how we try to live by. And for us, recognising that this last 9 months have been a tough 9 months for us, and or the second season, and a lot of learnings. And speaking to my friends who are in Super Rugby, every second year they said, especially after you start the new program, you start to experience little cracks and little things that you have to address and identify, and it makes you stronger long term, but you've got to go through it. And one of those things, that's what we experienced through the last two tournaments of this season. And it really, we had addressed and worked through things and really got to the heart, the heart of things. And it was exciting. We were training really well for the last 3 weeks before the COVID-19 virus. So it is frustrating and disappointing, because I think we were exactly where we needed to be to catapult into the Olympics, and going through some tough stuff made us really look at us ourselves and make sure that we knew where we didn't want to go again and what caused certain things. And the players were leading that ownership. But with another whole year to go in, I think it's absolutely perfect for us, as long as we can get back to training pretty soon.
That's a great outlook. And we all know how competitive the World Series is. And this year sees the U.S. drop to 5th place overall. So as far as we'll go, this season's done. But can you give us some insight, just the roller coaster and how hard it is day in, day out for those athletes to compete?
Yeah, very much so, mate. It's as I shared over year one we were defensive orientated in the sense of what our priority was to get in order. We set a very simplistic attacking framework in play, and I'm all about simplistic clarity and clear direction, and then the power of unity getting you where you're going. And I feel that the challenge for us coming into year two was not the worst thing. I mean, it was great confirmation that we were doing the right things. But you look at Glendale and we come out and we win that event. So we've just done 4 events in a row that we're pretty damn happy with, from Kirikishu in March the previous season all the way through to now just winning Glendale, our home tournament. And I think what come with that was, it would have happened anyway, but I think what happened was a little bit more of a kind of we ended up in a bit of a blame culture, and very briefly, just in the sense of, and what I mean by that is, it's like, okay, why aren't you doing this? You should be doing this, because now we know what we should be doing, and people should be doing. And if they're not, rather than it be, okay, I'm going to do anything I possibly can to make it easier for my teammate, it suddenly become, it was only just surfacing, etc. But when you play a sport where you've only got 7 people on that pitch, and it's so critical that you're all on the same page and you're fighting for each other, we just started to see little things creeping in that led to that in the end. And the girls, they identified it, they took it on, and as I say, that last month coming out, we were on fire. But I think one of the things also that, when I look back and I take ownership for myself, is I allowed us to get too far away from what we're good at. And remembering what we're good at and focusing on us, because ultimately that's what we can control most of. And the frameworks and the systems that we play are systems that they're stretching system. We're so far off doing them perfectly, which means that, no matter what the opposition does and how they adapt and change, I believe our systems or our frameworks that we play within that allow us to implement certain strategies are a huge stretch from where we are now to us being perfect. So instead of getting caught up in what's going to happen or what could change and what opposition are going to do, yes, we need to be aware of that, and we need to understand how what we do as a default, as a norm, combats that, but also do we need to make slight adjustments here or there, etc. But I just feel like we got caught up as a coaching crew a little bit too much on the what ifs and the opposition and the future, rather than being in the moment and trusting our systems and our approaches, continuing to enhance ourselves and focusing on our strengths would lead to that ultimate success that we're looking at. It's been a good reflection thing, but a pretty harsh one to have to go through myself,
I was going to say, it's very honest reflection and taking what part you played in, So final question on this side for the Rugby Hive listeners: how would you describe your coaching philosophy?
First and foremost, you got this is cool, and actually comes from the church that I attend, I go to. They talk about developing people. It's all about connecting, developing, empowering, and it's something that I've taken on for since a number of years since I've been there. It's all about how I can connect to the individual so that I gain their trust and I gain their belief and understand them better. Then it's the skill sets and it's understanding what they need, and then it's creating the room for them to flourish, the room for them to be empowered and take ownership and lead. And that's part of a process. And I think, again, coming back to the question about the additional year, I think we're just in a perfect position to be able to really catapult into that last principle of coaching, or the principle I live by or coach by, creating more empowerment and more ownership within the group of players.
Well, Brownie, it's been an absolute privilege to speak to you, and we really can't wait for 2021. Of course, I know you're chomping to go there. Brilliant to have the 2019 World Rugby Women's Sevens Coach on the Rugby Hive.
Robin, Dallen, great, thank you very much for the invitation. It's been great to connect with you, and looking forward to listening to the rest of your podcasts and the interviews that you guys are doing. So, cheers.
You want to hit that in Afrikaans as well?
Nee. Ja, vraag man.
Your bliksem. All right, bye, dankie, my friend. Thank you so much.
Beautiful ball over the top. Yes, Seppo!
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive Podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
I've taken a lunch money from South